This special Luka Modric episode of the Managing Madrid podcast is brought to you by Hilton Miami Downtown. Real Madrid will be playing against Al Hilal at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. And if you're planning on making the trip to see that game, make sure to book your stay at Hilton Miami Downtown. This upscale hotel is centrally located in downtown Miami along the Biscayne Bay and is connected to the Metro Mover. It features a rooftop pool, as you can see on the screen here, well-equipped gym, and spacious rooms. The elegant rooms at Hilton Miami Downtown feature floor-to-ceiling windows. We'll be there. You guys should be there. Real Madrid will be there. Book your stay at Hilton Miami Downtown for the Club World Cup. We are also brought to you by our friends over at Moji Mates. If you head on over to moji-mates.com, that's moji-mates.com, you can get a ton of swag, as you can see on the screen. They're having a special promo for Legends. And if you use code LEGENDS25, you can get a 25% discount. Rarely do they ever throw out like big discounts like that. So you guys should definitely take advantage and make sure you get your Luka Modric shirt. Make sure you get your Carlo Ancelotti shirt. You got to honor these guys, right? So go to moji-mates.com. Use code LEGENDS for 25% off. So it's moji-mates.com, moji-mates.com. Use code LEGENDS for 25% off. And of course, shout out to our presenting sponsor, TAFC Academy. Head on over to tacsports.ca to get the best coaching at the best academy in Toronto. So if you live in Toronto, and especially if you have kids, make sure you sign up your kids for the camps that are coming up, swimming camps, basketball camps, soccer camps, all over on tacsports.ca for the best coaching and the best academy and the best facilities in Toronto, hands down. And what are we doing today? We are going to talk about Luka Modric because why not? So let's do that.
Nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. First-rate podcast as well. Of course, Fede Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
So our brilliant writer and podcast host of Las Blancas, Yash Thakur, is going to come on in about 30 seconds because he wrote an article about Luka Modric. And I'd like to have more excuses to have Yash on. And if you write something really good, then that's a great reason. So we're going to talk about Luka Modric. We're not going to talk about anyone else like Carreras, which we already did a big scouting report on just a couple of days ago. That's on YouTube. That's on Spotify. That's on Apple. We're not going to talk about Nico Paz. If you want Nico Paz stuff, go to managingmadrid.com. There is analysis on Nico Paz. We also had a massive segment on yesterday's podcast for La Liga tier members. So if you want the whole Nico Paz analysis in written form, it's on managingmadrid.com. If you want analysis on Nico Paz in podcast form, that went up yesterday for our La Liga tier members. And I wanted to welcome in Yash Thakur, who is here on stage now, on the virtual stage. Yash, how you doing?
Yeah, all good, all good. Pretty excited with the announcements and everything, and looking forward to the new Xavi era.
Yeah, it would be exciting to talk to you too about a lot of this stuff because I haven't spoken to you in a while to get your thoughts on a lot of things. And so if you guys haven't already, go to managingmadrid.com and it's pinned on the homepage right here. Modric Magic one last time at the Bernabeu, written by Yash Thakur. Yash, be honest. I'm assuming that you had already made up your mind you were going to write about Modric before the game started, given it was his last game at the Bernabeu.
Yeah, 100%. As soon as that Comunicado Oficial dropped, I was like, yeah, this has to be written. He has to be celebrated somehow. And I think like his final performance at the Bernabeu was also really great, really encapsulating what his time as Madrid has been. So yeah, I mean, it was just, it had to be written.
Can you kind of go over as to why you thought maybe that game in particular encapsulated? And also throw this graphic on the screen that you put together for the article as well.
Yeah, so basically, in that game itself, he played 87 minutes. There was an element of departures in that game. Like there was a whole theme of players leaving, manager leaving. Even the opposition had their manager managing for the last game. So it was kind of that game. But when Modric took on field in that game, we saw everything. Once again, he was in that midfield, taking a lot of touches, not just deeper but higher up as well. He was moving the ball around like he's used to. He had one or two of those typical Modric runs with the ball, where he drops a shoulder and then carries the ball forward. So we basically got everything that we have from him in the last few years. And to sort of look at that game and see that he was in that game still the player with the most touches, player with the most passes, player with the most passes in the final third in his last game, after giving us all of that for 13 years. I think it really just tells you that his class never really declined. I have written about it as well, that even in his final game, he was the player that was sort of controlling where the ball moves and how it moves, dictating whether he's in the left half space, whether he is in the right half space. He was moving the ball around, he was picking out players. You can see in the pass plot there, a lot of those passes going into that left half space, which was a lot of the times it was Mbappe making that sort of out to in run from the wing and receiving them and taking the shot off from that left half space channel. And this was something that which is very Modric in a whole is a very unique profile that we have had, right? Like he can do the defensive work, he can do the controlling bit, he can basically play those line breaking passes, he can carry through the opposition midfield. And in this game, despite his age and everything, I think we got a little bit of everything, and that was really 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 great to watch.
Given this entire analysis, and you and I agree, like Modric looked really good in his last game, and in a lot of ways encapsulated who he is as a footballer, even at this age. And look, I don't think either of us are saying this is Modric of 2017, 18, etc. But he's still playing at a very, very high level, and certainly better than 99% of 39-year-olds at this level. It's a very, very unprecedented thing he's doing. The longevity is insane. The way he's basically still going toe to toe with some of the world's best players, even if it's more limited, even if it's fewer and far in between. Maybe it's not every game, but he's still there and he's still playing really good. Begs the question, and this is more like, I'd like to know your opinion personally on this. Not what the board would do, not what he would do, etc., but like Luka Modric turning 40 this summer, would it have made sense to keep him in the squad next season?
Honestly, I think yes, because over the few years, like we have lost a lot of experience every single year. We have lost a captain basically like almost consecutive years now, and probably next year as well, when Carvajal's contract expires, maybe we'll lose him as well. To sort of, we have a lot of young guys, we have a lot of new signings, we have a lot of players who are just entering their prime or about to enter their prime. So having somebody like him, and I'm not saying that he is going to be a burden on the squad, because he was one of the two players who did not get injured throughout this season, right? And he leads our squad in creating big chances and all sorts of metrics, right, on the ball. So it wasn't like he was going to be a burden for the rest of the team to carry. He can still have those minutes off the bench, and he can still help us in a lot of ways, where when the going gets tough, when we are sort of defending a lead against a tough opponent away from home, we have a lot of evidence of Modric coming on and sort of strangling the opposition, strangling their pressure, and trying to carry us through. And I think that bit of experience we can still get. Yes, not at the same level as we got over the years from him, but I think having that bit of experience in the dressing room would have helped a lot of the players. Like Arda Güler is still just in his early 20s, like he's going to be 21 or something now. Jude Bellingham as well is pretty young. Fede Valverde has been here for long, but he is still quite young. He will be entering his prime. Bellingham will soon enter his prime, whatever that looks like. A lot of these players could have done with a bit of Modric, but again, like board's policy with players above 30 years has, we all know how it is. So for somebody like him to get another extension would have been a very unprecedented sort of thing. But for a player like him, for a player of his caliber, that I think in my opinion, he's the best midfielder Real Madrid has ever had. I don't think there is any debate about that. Not even one of. I think he is the best for the amount of uh, moments that he has given, just for the amount of class we have gotten in every single game from him on the field for 12 straight, 13 straight years is crazy. I don't think we have seen that for sort of longevity from anyone across our history, and he's one of the best in football as well. So having that sort of experience in the dressing room, I think would have made sense. And he's still fit. Whenever he gets on the pitch, he still runs like he still has that energy of a early 30-year-old player. Like he can still go about his business like he used to. So yeah, I would have preferred for him to stay in a sort of rotational role for next season and help a lot of the young crop that we have. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on this one, Yash, because on one hand, I think, I guess I'll start with the reasons to keep him. I think if there's anyone in the club's history who has earned the right to just basically renew until he's 95, it's him, given all he's done for the club, and given that he's happy to take a lesser role, given that he has taken a couple pay cuts now to just stay. He's been very reasonable about it, and he's looks good still. Like he's not like someone who's just can't run. He's completely washed. He can't do anything. He can't kick a ball. Nothing. Like he is again. He's not what he used to be, but he's also one of those players who, if you rotate him in properly, and it doesn't have to be every game, but he plays strategic minutes, he can be a useful squad player. And also he has the experience and leadership and all the mentorship and all that stuff. On the other hand, to play the other side of the coin, it's that he has him just being in the squad. You have to wonder, is it, because I've always been on the faction of that it's better to move on 1 year too early than 1 year too late, and end on a high note and get the value from him. And in this case, I think it's more of a situation. We have all these promising young players that need to play. There are players that you could potentially bring in now, and they don't necessarily compete with him from a positional standpoint, but they kind of do, because it's inevitably a spot on the roster. And if Xabi wants to play a more high octane, higher tempo football that's higher up the pitch, and you have Nico Paz who can come back, you have Arda Güler who needs minutes, is also, and again, I'm not saying Angelo Stiller will be signed or not. I honestly have no idea what's going to happen there. But let's say if you want to bring in another midfield profile that you want right now when he's available this summer, you don't bring him in because you still have Modric in the squad. Those are things you have to consider. So it's a difficult conversation to have in some ways. I guess what I'm saying is, either way, I would understand the decision. If he stayed and it made sense for Xabi Alonso for him to be in the squad because of his mentorship and his ability to provide valuable minutes during all these injury and suspension crises that are bound to happen, then fine, that makes sense to me. If on the other hand, it's a situation where, he's getting in the way of playing time of the other developing players, you want to play a different brand of football, it's time to move on, and everything comes to an end, I totally get that too. So I'm not going to throw a fit either way, is what I'm saying. I'd lean towards it's time for it to move on from him, but it's closer to 50-50 than 80-20, I guess. So
yeah, I think the reason it's so difficult to sort of make that or have a proper stand on this is because for the last couple of years we have been expecting him to fall off a cliff. And I think he has not done that in any of the seasons. Like we were expecting, okay, now comes the downfall, now comes the ugly end of your late 30s or your early 40s sort of thing. But that hasn't happened with him, and that is why like it's so difficult to take a call on this and be like, okay, he has to leave now, okay, or he has to stay. So yeah, it's kudos to him, honestly, to be playing at that level.
So then my question to you is, how do you replace him? Does
That's
it come
that's
from
gonna be,
within, or is it someone that you need to sign?
honestly, looking at him, sort of his early days when he was a number 10, then transforming into this proper center midfielder who can, do all sorts of things on the pitch, right from defending to progression to chance creation. I think that's a very unique profile to look for a like for like replacement. I don't think there is going to be a player that can offer that all round ability at the same level that Modric did over the years. But I think within the squad, we do have players who have different elements of his play style that we can use, and we can replace him in aggregate, basically. Right, like we have Arda Güler, who towards the end of the season started getting a lot of minutes, and we started seeing how influential he can be with his line breaking passes, with his creative passing. Right, that was something that Modric also did in a lot of occasion, especially during the early days and all. Then we've got Fede Valverde, right? Fede Valverde has got that work rate that we got from Modric over the years in those three-peat years, where you would have Cruz not tracking back as much, you would have Casemiro in the box somehow, and then it would be Modric doing all the running and all the hard yards for the midfield to work. We have got Fede to do that. We have got both of them, are the Guler and Fede, to sort of compensate, or sort of try to replicate what he did with the ball as well in terms of passing. And then we have got this unicorn of a player in Jude Bellingham, who can do everything, provide the goals, add a little bit extra on top of what Modric did, while also being that ball carrier through the midfield, who can break lines, who can retain the ball under pressure when the opposition is getting too much, or we are playing away, and step up in that moment. So we have all these sort of players, and there's also Ceballos, who can circulate the ball quite well, I think, in that particular role of passing the ball around, keeping things ticking at the back, and building up play. I think Ceballos is quite good. So we do have the profiles in the squad to get what Modric brought on the table, but I think a like for like one player replacement is going to be very difficult, and I don't think we should be looking at it that way, because these sort of players that we have had over the last decade in Cruz and Modric, these aren't going to be replaced by a like for like player, because a like for like player does not exist. These were like two midfielders in the top echelon of football, and you get them every, well, 20 years, 30 years, you get one of them. We
I,
had
I
the
would say less, possibly every 50 years. I mean, I completely agree with you. That's why, like, the idea of replacing Cruz and Modric, the answer to that question is always you can't. If everyone could replace one of the greatest midfielders of all time and it was that easy, then you would just do it and it would be a seamless transition. But it's not that simple. Now you can talk about like profiles like Angelo Stiller, who is the talk of the town right now, and may or may not happen. But Yash, for me, the key factor here, or the X factor, is actually Jude Bellingham, and you mentioned him and what he can do. I think this, going back to the summer we signed Jude Bellingham, one of the things that I liked about Jude Bellingham was that in terms of the amount of ground he could cover, he
yeah.
did what peak Modric did, which was cover a ton of ground on defense. Um, and so I think I'm just really interested to see what Xabi Alonso does with Jude Bellingham and how he might be the solution to a lot of these questions of how do you replace Cruz and how do you replace Modric, because as we saw, Xabi Alonso said he sees Jude Bellingham as a midfielder. In some ways, that's a little bit vague in terms of like, okay, what does that mean? Is he an 8 or a 10 or 6?
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that it means he's an 8, but I'm not entirely sure. But does he classify Florian Wirtz as a midfielder because that's a different type of midfielder too. It's a more advanced attacking midfielder. But Bellingham has a bit of everything in that he has a bit of the tempo control that Cruz had. He has the ground coverage that Modric had, and he can do so many different things. I'm curious to know how him plus the correct surrounding pieces might be the answer to this for Xabi Alonso. Where do you see Bellingham fitting in next season?
I think it's a it's a quite interesting bit because the way Xavi is going to play, we are still like there are a lot of questions around it. Like we have seen his buyer, but we don't know how he's going to set up because we probably don't have enough depth to be playing a back three throughout the season. So does he switch between a back three and a back four? Because the role of midfielders in those two setups are entirely different. Like the responsibilities are entirely different, and you want different sort of profiles. But I think Bellingham is that one player who can fit in both of those setups. If you want him to do a lot of the defensive work, or if you want him to do a lot of the box to box stuff, he can do that. If you want him to be sort of in that controlling role where he gives you a little bit of distribution, he gives you a little bit of circulation, and then gives you a little bit of box crashing as well, you get that with him. In a back three where you have enough security, you have a player who can offer you a lot in attacking terms, and that is Jude Bellingham once again from midfield. If you're playing in a sort of 4-3-3, he can play as that advanced eight, or even as a box to box midfielder in that. So it all depends on how Xavi decides to set up and what sort of qualities he's looking for. I think he'll be spoiled for choices in terms of midfield with us. I think if you look at our options, if you consider that we haven't even spoken about Kamavinga in all of this, we haven't even spoken about Chouameni. So there are plenty of options. And if Nico Pass comes back, that's a player that again, based on what he has done this season in the Serie A, will give us a lot of attacking output that you are also expecting sort of the same from Arda Güler to give you a lot of those end product heavy stuff. So he's going to be spoiled for choices. It's going to be a headache for him to sort of pick the right combination. But yeah, that is what is the interesting part, because his conference, he said that he wants the fans to look at this team and say that this is their Real Madrid. He wants to play a very positive brand of football. He wants to press high, and even if you talk about pressing, you've got Jude Bellingham, because he's a monster, as you spoke about. He has got immense work rate. He can keep running throughout the 90. We have seen a lot of times where Vinny and Mbappe were not pressing, but it was this guy who was covering a lot of ground laterally, a lot of the ground horizontally. So, we have got that. It's going to be interesting what combination Xabi decides to go with, because it's honestly a headache to choose from the midfield options that we have.
Yeah, and you're right. And this is why, like, even I said the last couple of days that we just have more questions than answers at this point. We
Yeah.
just don't know until we see what Xabi Alonso actually does. And this is in some ways where I struggle to see someone like Stiller fit, because look at all these names. Like we've literally, it's almost difficult to remember how many players there are in the midfield. Like between Goulier and Camavinga and Chouameni and Bellingham and Fede Valverde, Nico Paz, if he comes back, that's 6 players. Ceballos 7. You have to like fit all these guys in. It's a lot of people, and this is even with Xabi Alonso, who rotates pretty
Yeah.
well. Like he does, and even still, like I think it'll be difficult to get through all that. So I'm very curious. Not to mention like what happens to Rodrigo, and all that. There's a lot of questions. I'm curious. I'm fascinated. I'm excited and curious to see how this unfolds. Any parting? I was gonna ask you like for parting thoughts on Modric, but it's cool that he's not gone yet. We still have the Club World Cup to see him, one last time. Hopefully, we can send him off with some silverware
Yeah.
there. But any other concluding thoughts, Yash?
No, in terms of concluding thoughts, like I think we have to celebrate this final tournament that we are going to get from such a such a legendary player that we have had. We have had the the pleasure of watching at our club. uh, Hopefully, as you said, we send him off with a trophy, and he gets to celebrate it in the Sibe with the Sibes, where as a captain he would be winning that trophy. And I would love to see that, honestly. I would love to see him sort of get whatever role he does with Chabi. I don't think it will be as significant, but I think he'll get some minutes. He'll still be important in that tournament. So yeah, I mean, I think when Real Madrid's history is spoken about, I think across different iconic moments, be it La Decima, be it the three-peat, be it winning our 14th, 15th, I think that whole video that Real Madrid put out, it was literally an iconic moment after iconic moment. And I think that is what sums up Luka Modric in a lot of ways. He has been a part of all of those iconic moments we have had in the last decade, and that is all down to his quality. So yeah, I mean, we have got to experience two of the best midfielders in world football. So yeah, pretty.
Uh, yeah, I mean, this one hit hard, and I think it's there's so many of these departures that have hit hard, right? And I think
Yeah,
the fact it's a testament to how great that initial era with all of them was. That as they all left and they hit hard, like Ramos leaving, Casemiro and Cruz and Modric, and obviously Cristiano. Starting off one of leaving in 2018. Bale eventually left, and it's like the fact that we're just like destroyed watching all these departures, like emotionally. The club will go on, but it just speaks to how speaks to how special that era was. And you think back,
yeah,
like I've been a fan, Yash, since 1998. I can't remember like having an era so epic that like years later we're like mourning departures. Like we had that with Zidane, and really like after that, like when Figo left, it was like, okay, he just went to Inter, got old, okay, and it's like we didn't really have this like special thing. Like Raul left, I think 2010, if I'm not mistaken. Guti left at the same time. That was pretty sad, but this was just I haven't seen anything like this where it's like 2017, 2018, 21, 22, 23, 24, and now 25 with Modric leaving and Ancelotti leaving. Yeah, that era was something. It was something special. Yash. Yeah. So
yeah,
luckily, I think we won't have to go through this emotional damage for a while because the rest of the team is pretty young. So like once we get to like Jude leaving and Vinny leaving like 10, 15 years from now, then that's going to hit hard too. But we have a pretty young nucleus outside of Carvajal who, will be the last link. But yeah. Everyone, please go to managingmadrid.com and read Yash Thakur's article. There's also analysis on Nico Paz. There is plenty of analysis on Xabi Alonso. All your latest news, like Arbeloa and Raul and all of that. This is Yash's article here. Modric Magic one last time at the Bernabeu. Tons of analysis regularly. Also, Yash co-hosts the Las Blancas podcast with Kani. So just search Las Blancas on YouTube and on Twitter, and you'll come across it. They do incredible work covering Real Madrid Femenino regularly. So make sure to follow Las Blancas as well. Yash, thanks for your time. Appreciate you, and hope to have you on more often. Thank you.